Hello and welcome to another video from the only channel that you need to not only survive the current apocalypse but actually enjoy it. And a while back I did a video about all the forest projects I had going on out here, and I said that as I made a little progress that I do some videos to show you that progress. Well, that's not what we're going to do today, but we'll show you one little teeny tiny part of it because I need some advice from somebody that knows what they're doing. I don't need any opinions. I got all kinds of opinions myself, but I have no experience with growing things like grapes or air potatoes, also known as wing yams. But I think that both of them will grow year-round as a permaculture crop and not require protection from the cold, because we do get frost down here. This year we only got about an hour of freezing temperatures. It got down to about 32 degrees for an hour, but other than that we really didn't have a winter. But that's not the way it always is. We've had days that were below freezing for a solid week before, and so a lot of plants won't take that. I don't need any advice about planting anything that cannot take a freeze. Here's a little bit of video that I took a few months ago, and we're walking up on an area that I think will be good for growing vines, because as you can see in this video, this dead tree is completely filled with vines. At the time that I made the video, I said that I had an idea at one time of just setting this tree on fire to get rid of it, but I decided since it was so hard that it was probably going to stay erect for many, many years, and I might build a tree house out of it. Now I've got somewhat of a hybrid idea of what I might do with it. And here is the same area walking up on with all of the vines ripped out. It was a lot of work. I put off doing this for years, but I finally made myself get out here and pull them out. As you can see, there's a lot of vines still up in the tree, and that's because sometimes when you're pulling them out, instead of everything coming out, the vines will just break off and leave all that mess up there. But once you separate the vines from the ground, they start to dry out pretty quick, and once they get dry, they lose their grip and fall. Every time you have a bad storm, you'll find that a lot of the vines that you couldn't get out before will come out on their own, like this right here. Years ago, I found this huge pile of barbed wire out in the woods, but it was so far from the house that I knew it would take me years before I would get out here and have to deal with it. Initially, I thought maybe I would just somehow get it into garbage cans and dispose of it. But it is a resource, and I'm out here now. And so anyway, I started a little fire, and I burnt all of the vines and such off of it and freed it up. So it doesn't look like it's going to be impossible to salvage this wire, but at the same time, it's not going to be easy. But I'm thinking that I may incorporate this into my arbor. So I don't know if I want to have to deal with barbed wire in my stuff, but anyways, we'll figure something out. I also found this. After I burnt all my debris here, there was some fence sticking up out of the dirt, and I was able to pull this up out of the ground. Hopefully I can use it as well. When I initially started clearing the vines out of this tree, the first idea I had was to use this tree for a tree house. I've always wanted a tree house, but I know that tree houses damage live trees. With this one, that wouldn't be an issue. This is obviously dead. But as I was pulling the vines out, I realized that this tree was supporting a whole lot of wild grapes. So the idea came to me that maybe I could use this tree to do the same thing for some vining fruit crops, perhaps cultivated grapes. The grapes that were in here, if you think wild grapes are okay, then you may not have experience with the kind of wild grapes we have around here. A lot of them don't produce any fruit whatsoever, just little clusters of seeds. Others produce grapes, but they're real sour or real small or have a very thick skin or a whole lot of seeds. So I really would rather have a cultivated grape, since I don't have a whole lot of space for grapes. I want the grapes that I put effort into growing to be nutritious and delicious and easy to eat. So we're probably going to do some grapes on this tree. Another thing I've got in my head is some wing jams, also known as air potatoes. I had a subscriber send me one or two before, And I tried growing them in a pot in a greenhouse, and the problem with that is if you forget about something you have in a pot in a greenhouse, it dies, whereas if you forget about something you have in the ground, it's not really that big of an issue. And since I forget quite a bit, mine died. So I never got an opportunity to harvest any more seeds off of it or fruit off of it. And I really just don't have experience with that either. In fact, there's nothing I can think of that grows as a vine that I have experience with other than morning glories. So if you know of any kind of a food crop that can take a little bit of chill every year and is easy to grow, let me know. I'm all ears. I don't want to waste a whole lot of time doing something stupid if somebody out there can stop me before I actually do that. Now, the area that I'm standing on is actually an abandoned waste pile that somebody used in the 1950s, and as a result, it's full of broken glass and metal, and I showed you earlier the fencing and the barbed wire, but there's also a bunch of this in the ground here, and so that's going to have to be dealt with. If any of the vining crops that you're suggesting grow root crops, I think there's a workaround. I'm not going to go through here and dig all this glass out, but I can dig a hole maybe this big and fill it with some potting soil so that I don't have to deal with glass when I'm digging up root crops. For things that aren't root crops like grapes, it's not an issue. The roots will grow around the glass. It's not going to be any kind of a problem. Yeah, this is probably going to be good for grapes because that's what was growing in here. That's what most of the vines were that I took out of this. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the things I have in mind for my vine garden so you can get an idea of how I'm thinking. First thing, obviously, that we should talk about is grapes, since that's what was growing here before. Hopefully, the grapes that I get will completely cover this full length of this tree. Hopefully, not just producing fruit at the end. I would like to get a kind of grape that could grow between 15 and 25 feet long and produce fruit all the way from ground level to its end, not just hanging up there where I can't reach it. I do have plans on putting a platform here which will allow me to harvest fruit anywhere on this tree, so we want to use the full length. The next thing that I already talked about are the air potatoes or winged yam. They got a couple of different varieties that will grow here. All three are actually edible. One will cause sterility. One doesn't taste all that great, but I've got some on order that are the kind that are best for food. And they say you can actually eat these things that hang off of the vines, but what you're really going for is the roots, because over time the flavor gets better, nutrition supposedly gets better, and these roots are just what develops under the ground from planting the things that grow up on the vine. Here's a picture of some growing out in the wild, having escaped cultivation. It's actually considered a noxious invasive weed in some places. Anytime something edible is considered a noxious invasive weed, I call it food. Another thing that seems to grow everywhere, they don't call it a noxious invasive weed because so much of it is native to this area, is morning glories. And I have eaten the leaves before, so I know they won't kill you. And I've heard that you can eat the seeds because they're a hallucinogenic. But what we're really trying to grow is the roots. I've heard that morning glories, just like everything in the sweet potato family, will grow edible roots. But there isn't any information out there about which varieties grow what kind of roots. And this picture, the big one in the back, was actually from a shrub type morning glory. It's the one in the front we're interested in because that grew from a vine type morning glory. And another plant that has gotten a reputation as a noxious invasive weed is the ivy gourd. Here's what the vines look like. What we're actually trying to grow are the fruit. And I know that this stuff will grow here because a few years ago I found some growing about a quarter of a mile from here. But now, during the time it was in a drought and I could get to this location, but now it's been raining a lot, so there's a whole lot of water between me and where these vines used to grow. Plus it's grown up so much with stickers I probably couldn't even get in there. But the ones that I found were like the green one hanging on the bottom, which I think is the more mature fruit. And the ones that I located kind of looked like this, but they looked actually a whole lot like watermelons. They had that same exact pattern that watermelons I have on the side. I bit into it just to see what it tasted like because it looked a whole lot like a cucumber, and it actually tasted exactly like a cucumber, but not the cucumbers that you want to eat. If you've ever gotten a cucumber that was really, really bitter, that's what it tasted like. And I think that may have something to do with the stage of maturity. But if not, if they just always taste like that, the only way I can think of to eat them would be to cook them. And here's something else I've seen growing here. And the place where it was planted, it wasn't replanted, and yet it all came back. And it didn't really come back from the roots. It looked like it came back from seeds. These things produce a whole bunch of seeds. It's called Malabar spinach. And they've got a red variety and a green variety. And it tastes just like spinach. So I've got some seeds of that coming. And this is a passion flower. For anybody who's ever seen one, you already know what that is. They look like a species from an alien planet. We've got them here. A lot of people plant passion flowers. But I always grew them for the fruit, and mine comes back every year and never produces fruit. It basically produces like a little paper bag. No flavor, no juice, nothing. But I found a man on eBay that lives south of me in Zone 10 who says these things will grow in Zone 9 with fruit. And this is what the fruit looks like, passion fruit. If I can't get it to grow on my vine in the woods, I've actually made a decision to go ahead and clean out my greenhouse and plant a couple of great big pots of passion fruit and just let it live in there year round. I've moved the camera around to this side so that you can see some of the other things I'm going to be working with. I'm a kind of waste not, want not type of guy. I guess you can see that there's some posts in the ground out here. So those posts are a resource that have already been invested in by somebody 50 years ago, and I don't see any reason to get rid of them if I can incorporate them. But also, a big resource here is the labor that was put into placing those posts, as well as the labor that it would take me to pick them up out of the ground and put them somewhere else. So I'm going to try my best to work with these posts where they are. The fencing that I found on the other side is probably going to be wrapped around these posts. In other words, make a little fenced-in area and use that as part of the arbor. Initially, I thought maybe I could just put some post, extend some post out this way until I was up underneath these limbs with some really, really long posts. But I tried to measure them. I can't actually get my tape measure that high. But I know that it would take about a 22-foot post to support this limb. Now over there, that post would only have to be 16 feet because it's 15 feet from a good support point on that limb to the ground. And you really only have to put a post about a foot into the ground in concrete to support that. But what I finally figured out is that perhaps I'll take and get taller and taller posts and just come out, kind of follow this pattern that's been set by whoever put these earlier posts in until it's over here underneath this tree, and then make those tall enough to put a tower there so that I could easily harvest whatever grows near the top of my intended arbor. This one here is kind of on a hill. And I actually was able to touch that limb. I know I'm right about 6 feet tall at eyeball level. And when I had this thing up there, it was right about 10 feet. So, well, not 10 feet, 9 feet. So that puts me right around 15 feet. Just about the right size for a 16-foot pole. And another thing is I could probably locate some taller poles somewhere, but then I got to worry about how am I get them up here. 16 foot is about the full length of what I can carry behind my little car or in my neighbor's pickup truck. And I don't want to have to pay some lumber yard $50 delivery fee on one $25 post. So anyways, we'll see how this develops. I am pretty confident that eventually I'll put a platform here. For the time being, probably the important thing is just to get the plants in and get them started and get them in the ground, because I can always build this around them. Along with the initial steps of identifying that dead tree and cleaning all of the vines out of it, I've also taken the step of cleaning out my greenhouse and getting it ready for propagation again. I haven't propagated anything new in a long time because I haven't had any space for planting new stuff that I propagated. But I ordered some morning glories and some passion fruit, and I've got those started in here. I've also already ordered the Malabar spinach and a few other items that are vining plants. And when they come in, I'll get them in some starters as well. Oh well. Still working on my permaculture projects, and that wraps it up for this one for right now. And as always, if you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.